to music first, always.
We are unstoppable.
Open the frontiers to make people meet people.
Music is not fireworks. Music is feeling.
You're good to go.
Thank you, vote for the music!
This is Vote for the Music, the Eurovision podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Vote for the Music, the Eurovision podcast. I'm Benjamin Windibank, and yes, I am here after an absence of the last episode, which my co-host very kindly covered for. I am back. Now, the reason I wasn't there is because straight after that first semi-final in Malmö, I was out celebrating the Irish qualification. Yes, if you rewind a few months, you may have remembered my thoughts on Ireland. Let's just say that's changed quite a lot. Initially, it left a very, very negative impression on me, and now it is one of my favourites, my absolute favourites, and I really think it's in a very good chance of winning at least the televote on Saturday night. So yes, lots of things can change when we come to the live Eurovision show. Always keep that in mind, because what we see in the pre-season and what we see on stage in the host city can change everything. So as for this semi-final, let's dive straight right in. So obviously a lot of the main things are the same. You know, we're in the same arena, same stage, same host, same types of postcards, so we don't really need to cover those. But let's begin with the start of the show. And as Liverpool reintroduced last year, we get a recap of the first semi-final, showing us who got through, and then we go to the main stage. And we get Petra and Marlene inside Lorene's sandwich press staging, if that's what we want to call it, singing a parody of Tattoo, which was last year's winning song. And when I say parody, I mean parody. They're singing about lyrics to do with the contest, to do with silly things from the past, to do with getting onto stage, getting from Stockholm to Copenhagen to Malmö. It works quite well. Then, of course, once that's finished, the two of them come on stage and introduce the show as normal, before we get underway, fairly quickly compared to Tuesday. We go through the running order: Malta, Albania, Greece, Switzerland, Czechia, until we go to our first ad break. So that's 5 songs, then an ad break. In this ad break, we do again a similar thing to we had in the first semi-final. In the first semi-final, Marlene did a tribute to Nicole from Nicole and Hugo, which came last in 1973 but was very iconic, and of course Nicole died a year ago. Here, we get a very similar thing, where we get a tribute for Jan Teigen, who was the Norwegian artist who very famously came last with 0 points in 1978 with the song Mil etter mil. He also entered in 1982 and 1983 and entered MGP way more times. He passed away in 2020, a little further in the past, but still recently than Nicole, but still we get a tribute to him. And the tribute is a video compilation of famous Eurovision last places. Interestingly, at least on the Dress Rehearsal and the Joy Rehearsal, there was an error on the clip of Gemini, which was the UK's act that finished last in 2003. The graphics on screen say Great Britain, not the United Kingdom, which was not the participating country's name. There's also continual issues here that were present in the first semi-final, but even worse yet and even more frequent is that the use of the archive footage seems to be ripped off YouTube from non-official sources, from VHS copies, from versions with logos on, not the clean, pristine copies the EBU we know have in their archive because they've brought them out on several occasions before, not at least last year in Liverpool. So that is very odd, very bizarre. But yes, these video compilation segments are full of things like that, which just make you go, why aren't they doing this properly? It's actually very, very poor. After that ad break, they introduce our first automatic qualifier of the night, and that is France. And then we move on again through the running order, which is Austria, Denmark, Armenia, before going back to an ad break with Marlene and Petra. And this is quite a fairly amusing skit, where they try and single out all the groups of ticket buyers in the audience, from what countries they're from. So they say things like, "Oh, my friends from France, let me hear you." We get applause, and then Petra does a little section all in French, and then goes, "Oh, my friends from Spain, let me hear you," and does a little section in there. And then there's a joke about her not knowing any German, as you'd expect. It always ends with some sort of joke. Then we go back into the running order. We get Latvia, and then we go to an automatic qualifier, Spain. And this is the first time we've had an automatic qualifier where it's not been introduced. It just goes into it. So I guess they're assuming we're used to it by now, by this point. But considering they could have had the ad break one song later after Latvia and then done the usual thing, it is a bit odd, but that's just how they formatted it. Then after Spain, we go into San Marino, then into Georgia, then into Belgium, then into Estonia, then into Italy. Again, no break, it just goes straight in. And then we continue into Israel. Now, we did not review Israel's entry. We made a point at the time, if you listen to our quick review of Norway, which is the song which came afterwards, that we were not reviewing it on the grounds of their participation, not only bringing the contest into disrepute, but also the fact they have continually tried to enter a song that was political and use the contest for political reasons and political motivations, and have continually broke many long-standing rules that the EBU have just ignored, and as along with much of the fan media are very concerned about this, have chosen not to cover them. However, I think it is right to speak about the way that Israel was received in the audience from what we can see on screen and what has come out from videos from the audience. The entirety of Israel's performance was booed, heckled, jeered at, shouted at for the whole 3 minutes. This was sending a message that Eurovision does not want Israel here, does not want Eden Golan here with her song. Obviously, there is the argument, and it's the argument that will always be trotted out, that the artist has nothing to do with their national government. The broadcast has nothing to do with their national government. That this is just an artist who happens to be from Israel who is singing a song. But while officially, yes, it's a competition between broadcasters who are members of the European Broadcasting Union, when those performers take to the stage, they aren't representing their broadcaster, they're ambassadors for their country. Why else do we get a flag parade? When we go to the scoreboard, it's not Cannes on screen, it's not BBC on screen, it's not SVT on screen, it is Israel, the United Kingdom, Sweden. Eden Golan is knowingly taken to the Eurovision stage for Israel after it's been involved in horrific actions over the past 7 months. And can we really think Eden Golan is blind to what has happened? Can you really believe she is devoid of any vision, any sight of what is happening in Israel and what is happening in Gaza and the rest of the occupied Palestinian territories? And Eden Golan is fully aware of this because she's entered this song several times with far worse lyrics that are far more explicitly political, doing its best to try and paint Israel as the victims, despite the fact they have murdered over 30,000 civilians over the past few months. Those were rejected by the EBU, changed and changed again, given more chances than Belarus ever got before they got kicked out. Far more chances. So in that light, it's not the audience reactions of boos and jeers and heckling simply the most peaceful way to protest against what Eden Golan is symbolising and what she knows she's symbolising and what she's choosing with pride to symbolise. Let's be clear about this. If you look at the lyrics, not just what they try to enter, but the current day lyrics is a propaganda song. No question about it. The audience were making that abundantly clear. And on the broadcast, on the stream, you could hear this. They were trying to cover it up. There were sections where they were trying to turn off audience mics, turn them down. There were sections where they were putting over canned applause, but you could still hear it. Over every single word Eden Golan was singing, you could hear Free Palestine. You could hear Shame on You. You could hear boos, heckling, jeering. It was non-stop. And there is very likely nothing the EBU can do to stop this from happening on tonight's show. And I implore you to think about that and then to look at the site bit.ly/Eurofansgive. Look at that site, look down the list of links there and give Help Palestine, Help Gaza. In place of Israel's propaganda, do some good. Do what the EBU will not do. Support the victims. And unfortunately, all of that makes it very difficult for Norway coming straight after that. We have no break, we just go straight into Norway. And I fear a lot of viewers will be so in shock by watching what they just saw, so confused, so conflicted, so uncomfortable by it. People are going to be angry and they're going to be distracted and they're not going to be thinking about the next song. And that makes it very hard for Norway to grab their attention again. I really worry about Norway's chances. Norway always seemed like they were locked in for a top 10 place. And after that, after what is likely to be on tonight, I worry that Norway potentially might not get through to the final now. Because you may think I'm exaggerating, but based upon what was on the show last night at the jury rehearsal, no one is going to be paying attention to Norway, and that is a real shame. And finally, after that, we end with the Netherlands, which does set the arena alight. It is a big, big hit with the audience, and it does bring the mood back up again after the last very uncomfortable 10 minutes. Then we go into a skit about how it's been 50 years since ABBA won the Eurovision Song Contest, and they return to Brighton to see how much ABBA has changed the city. And the answer is, hasn't really. And then we go back to Petra and Marlin. It's quite funny in context. Wait till you see it. Then after a recap, we get, can only be described, I think, and I will say this very happily, as potentially the worst Eurovision interval act since Guy Tell in 1989. This is the Eurovision sing-along, which features 3 former winners, Helena Paparizou, Charlotte Perrelli, and Sertab Erenerä, which sounds like a great lineup and sounds like it's going to be great. It does not work. Essentially, they're going around with a mic to the audience trying to get them to sing along. It doesn't work. They're not really in time. There's no atmosphere. The lead artists are trying to guide the vocals. It's a mess. And it was so messy afterwards. Marlin basically apologised to the audience for how bad it was. SVT should really look at that, see that it was not working, and either change it dramatically to remove the sing-along element, just have those artists perform their songs, or cut the interval entirely. And there is something they can replace it with, and we'll get onto that a bit later because it feels like that absolutely should go in this slot. But this interval act does not work. And it wouldn't be the first time an interval act's been replaced. In 2014, the grand final had an interval act that was entirely cut because they realised it was absolutely awful and entirely unfunny. So it can be done. After that, we get another one of these video compilations, except it's a compilation of famous national final entries from Eurovision history and big artists that have entered national finals. It's the first time really national finals have been brought up in any meaningful way in the Eurovision Song Contest. And of course, if any country was going to do this, it was going to be Sweden. After that, we go back to Marlin and she does a little speech where she ends up listing off a load of Eurovision slogans in a kind of workable sentence. It's very cheesy, not very funny, but it's there. Then we get the big highlight of the show. I think the thing that this semi-final is going to be remembered for as we step further into the future and look back on it. We get Petra Murder's big show number, We Just Love Eurovision Too Much. And essentially the whole concept of it is it's an apology for Sweden winning last year and hosting it this year, but they can't help it because they just love Eurovision too much. The whole thing is sung not just by Petra Murder, but a very special guest, and that is Charlotte Perrelli. So it's them two as a double act, which, to be honest, watching those two on stage do this performance, it makes you wonder, why is this show not presented by Petra Murder and Charlotte Perrelli? Why is Marlin Aukerman here? Now, Marlin is good, she's a good presenter, but when you have Petra and Charlotte putting your face in front of you as a duo, who have far more chemistry, you go, why did we not have that one? Yes, the show number is great. There's loads of jokes in it. We include the return of Linda Woodruff, who does a rap. Yes, a rap. Given the events of the last half an hour before this, there's a rather tone-deaf joke Petra makes in the lyrics about Eurovision definitely not being political, which just feels in the context of what we just had, just not appropriate, and is just going to make people grit their teeth. And I really suggest to the EBU, suggest to SVT, just change that one line in the circumstances. It's just not going to go down well. And in fact, it did not go down well last night. But finally, the lyrics take us to the introduction of something along the lines of, but if Finland had won and had been hosting it this year, this would be the interval act. And then we get a slight mockery of Finnish stereotypes before Harrier comes in, takes over the stage, and does a full sort of minute and a half long version of Cha 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 with the original dancers in the original routine, completely taking over the arena. It is hilarious. And then we go back to Charlotte and Petra as they close it off. It's a really good interval act. It's just that one line I think needs to be removed because it just grates with what we've just had. It just does not work. Then, as expected, the green room opens, we do the qualifier announcements, but then after the qualifier announcements, we get something we've never ever had in Eurovision history before, and we get an interval after the qualifier announcements. And it's very odd. The Herres just come on and do the full 3 minutes of Digaloo Digalay. For the last minute of that, we do get end credits rolling over it. But the first 2 minutes, they're just on the stage, the qualifiers are sort of behind them, awkwardly clapping, and it just feels really random. So I would suggest, if you're going to get rid of the Eurovision sing-along thing that we had earlier in the semi-final, because, I say, it really does not work whatsoever, then just move the Herres to that position, have the Herres in that position, and then have the end credits go as normal, because it's just bizarre, it is odd, it doesn't really make sense, it feels random, like they're just suddenly thrusting 3 old men onto the stage just to extend the show, which is by this point already overrunning by quite a bit, even longer. But yes, that is, by my reckoning, what to expect from the second semi-final of the Eurovision Song Contest 2024, which is on TV on your national broadcaster at 8 p.m. in the UK, 9 p.m. in the most of Europe tonight. So watch out for that. It's certainly going to be an eventful night. I'd also like to remind you, in light of the situation, please go to the website bit.ly/Eurofansgive and look at the links on there. We'll of course be back tomorrow with a after show all about semi-final 2. So to keep up with that, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, whatever else you may get your podcasts. And that includes YouTube, where you can subscribe to us, leave a comment down below, or give us a like. You can also interact with our Q&As on Spotify. But until the next time, thank you, and remember to vote for the music.
This is to music first, always.
We are unstoppable.
Open the frontiers to make people meet people.
Music is not fireworks. Music is feeling.
Don't you vote for the music!